I never wanted you. The Mafia boss screamed at his black wife. Hours later, she was his only hope. The Seoul Grand Hall's marble corridors carried sound like a weapon, sharp, unforgiving, impossible to escape. Zola Akojua stood in the East Gallery, her wedding gown still heavy on her shoulders 3 hours after the ceremony, her fingers absently tracing the intricate beadwork she'd never asked for. 28 years old, and this was supposed to be a strategic alliance. Clean, professional, bloodless. Instead, her heart hammered as she heard Kyung-soo's voice echoing from the conference room at the end of the hall. She hadn't meant to listen. She'd been searching for the logistics files he'd promised to review, the Busan shipping contracts that needed signatures before midnight. But hearing that voice, the one that had spoken vows to her just hours ago, made her freeze mid-step. She was never part of my plan. The Korean words cut deeper than English ever could. More final. More real. Hey, family. Welcome to another heart-stopping Mafia romance that will have you on the edge of your seat from the very first scene. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love connecting with you all. And if you're new here, please hit that like button, share this story with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe. Your support means the world to me and keeps these stories coming. Zola pressed her palm against the cool wall, her wedding ring, a flawless 3-carat diamond she'd never chosen, suddenly feeling like a shackle. The ivory silk gown that had cost more than her first car felt like a costume. Then why marry her? Hyungnam? That was Ji-hun, Kyung-soo's head of security. The man who'd escorted her to every pre-wedding meeting like she was cargo being delivered. Her father saved my life in Lagos, Kyung-soo replied, and Zola could picture him perfectly, though she couldn't see him. 35 years old, sharp jawline, eyes that assessed everything twice, a man who wore power like other men wore cologne. And she understands global shipping better than anyone in my organization. The Nigerian routes, the European connections. She built supply chains that Fortune 500 companies couldn't crack. Her father, Emmanuel Akojua, who had sat her down 6 months ago in his Lagos office and explained that her career meant nothing. Her plans to expand her logistics consulting firm, her dreams of revolutionizing African trade infrastructure, her late nights optimizing routes on platforms like SAP and Oracle. None of it mattered. The Kim syndicate needed expertise. She was the payment plan. She's intelligent. I'll give you that. Another voice chimed in. Min-jae, Kyung-soo's younger brother, who always looked at her like she was a puzzle with missing pieces. Good asset for the organization. Asset. Not partner. Not wife. Asset. Zola bit the inside of her cheek, tasting copper, fighting every instinct to storm into that room and show them exactly what this asset thought of being reduced to inventory. But she'd survived in male-dominated boardrooms since she was 23. She understood the rules. Women stayed composed, stayed strategic, stayed 3 steps ahead. Intelligence isn't what I needed in a wife, Kyung-soo said, and there was something cold in his voice. Something that made Zola's stomach clench with an emotion she refused to name. Was it anger? Betrayal? I needed someone from my world. Someone who understands loyalty without explanation. Not a woman who thinks in spreadsheets and treats my empire like a logistics problem to solve. The injustice stole her breath. Logistics problem. She'd spent the last 4 months quietly identifying the leaks in his shipping network that had cost him millions. She'd traced the corruption back to 3 of his most trusted lieutenants. She'd rebuilt routes through West Africa that his predecessors had deemed impossible. And he saw her as sheltered. She'd watched her mother fade in a loveless marriage, her brilliance dimmed year by year, trapped beside a man who valued obedience over partnership. She'd seen what this life did to women, how it erased them until they were nothing but elegant shadows moving through expensive rooms, downing wine just to survive family gatherings. She'd spent her entire life building her own power, only to be handed to a man who commanded even more fear than her father. What happens now? Ji-hun asked, and Zola found herself leaning closer despite knowing she shouldn't. Her pulse thundering so loud she thought they might hear it. She gets the West Wing. She can have whatever she wants. Kyung-soo dismissed, his tone so casual it felt like a slap. As long as she stays out of syndicate operations and maintains appearances, she can install all the smart systems and efficiency software she wants. I don't care. Something inside Zola crystallized. Not broke. She'd never been naive enough to expect love from a power marriage. But her dignity, her sense of self-worth, the stubborn part of her that had demanded respect in every boardroom she'd entered, hardened into something sharp. You're brutal, Hyung? Min-jae laughed, the sound grating against her nerves like metal on stone. At least pretend she matters. I'll fulfill my obligation to her father. Nothing more. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Zola didn't wait to hear the rest. She gathered her silk skirts and walked. Not ran, walked. Back through the corridors with her head high. Her heels clicked against marble with deliberate precision. Her vision blurred, but she refused to let a single tear fall. Not here. Not where anyone could see. The powder room was mercifully empty. She locked the door and gripped the marble sink, staring at her reflection in the ornate mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger. Professional makeup highlighting her Nigerian features. Dark eyes usually sharp with calculation now burning with something dangerous. Full lips painted wine red. A bride. A transaction. A complication he never wanted. Her phone buzzed. An encrypted message from her assistant back in Lagos, the only person who knew the real reason she'd agreed to this marriage. The Beck Syndicate is moving on the Busan routes. You have 72 hours. 72 hours until the real game began. 72 hours until Kyung-soo discovered that the woman he'd dismissed as a logistics problem was the only thing standing between his empire and total collapse. Zola looked at her reflection one more time, watching her expression shift from hurt to something calculating, something dangerous. He'd said he never wanted her. He was about to learn exactly how much he needed her. But to understand how Zola got here, standing in a stranger's home, wearing a dress that cost more than her first car, preparing to marry a man who saw her as a corporate acquisition, you need to know what they said about power marriages in their world. They said power marriages were clean, efficient, bloodless. They lied. 6 months later, the Kim estate had become a museum of careful avoidance. Zola moved through the West Wing like a ghost with a purpose, her presence marked only by the soft click of her laptop keys and the scent of Ethiopian coffee she imported herself. Kyung-soo occupied the East Wing, his territory marked by expensive whiskey and late-night phone calls in rapid Korean she'd learned to tune out. They were strangers bound by a surname and nothing else. Publicly, they were untouchable. Seoul's elite watched them at charity galas with equal parts envy and fascination. The Korean crime lord and his brilliant African wife, standing shoulder to shoulder in designer clothes, their body language suggesting a partnership built on steel and understanding. It was a masterful performance. Privately, they were ice. Breakfast happened in shifts. Dinner was separately catered to opposite wings. The twice-monthly public appearances required a week's notice through intermediaries, like scheduling a corporate merger. Zola didn't cry about it anymore. She worked. Late at night, while the estate slept, she'd pull up the shipping manifests Kyung-soo's accountants sent her, the only communication she received from his organization. They thought they were humoring her, giving the boss's wife something to keep her occupied. They had no idea she was mapping their entire operation. The Busan route alone was bleeding 3 million won per quarter. The Nigerian connections her father had promised, compromised by a middle manager who was skimming off the top and selling information to competitors. The European ports showed signs of systematic sabotage. Delayed shipments, lost cargo, paperwork that mysteriously vanished. Zola saw it all. She documented everything. She fixed nothing. Not yet. Kyung-soo noticed the improvements before he understood their source. Shipments that had been delayed for weeks suddenly moved smoothly. The Busan route's losses slowed, then stopped. A corrupt manager in Lagos mysteriously resigned, replaced by someone competent. Who authorized these changes? He demanded during a rare encounter in the main hallway, his voice sharp with suspicion. Zola looked up from her tablet, her expression neutral. Good morning to you too. The shipping routes. Someone's been restructuring them. Then you should thank whoever's saving you money. She moved past him, her shoulder nearly brushing his, the closest they'd been in weeks. He wanted to grab her arm, demand answers. Instead, he watched her walk away, her spine straight, her head high, wearing casual clothes that somehow made her look more powerful than his associates in their expensive suits. He hated that he noticed. Hated that part of him wanted to follow her, to ask her opinion, to talk to her like she was more than a contractual obligation. He hated that he needed her, so he convinced himself he didn't. Zola wrestled with her own demons. Every fix she implemented, every problem she solved in silence, felt like swallowing glass. She'd built her career on recognition, on being the smartest person in the room and making sure everyone knew it. Now she was playing ghost, protecting an empire for a man who'd never wanted her. Pride told her to stop, to let his organization bleed, to watch him fail and walk away untouched. But something deeper, something she refused to examine too closely, wouldn't let her watch him fall. The major breach came on a Tuesday. Zola was reviewing the Singapore routes when she saw it. A complete system compromise. Someone had accessed the master shipping codes. Every route, every contact, every safe port exposed. She had maybe 6 hours before competitors exploited it. 6 hours before Kyungsu's empire started hemorrhaging losses that would take years to recover from. She didn't ask permission. She didn't send a message. She simply worked. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, rerouting shipments, changing access codes, setting up dummy routes to trap whoever had stolen the information. By dawn, she'd built an entirely new network, seamless and secure, while feeding false data to the breach point. She saved everything, alone, without permission. Kyungsu discovered the breach at 6 a.m. His security chief's face was pale as he explained the compromise, the potential losses. It's already fixed, sir. Kyungsu froze. What? Someone restructured everything overnight. We're secure. Better than before, actually. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Silence. Find out who. But Kyungsu already knew. There was only one person in his organization brilliant enough, ruthless enough, angry enough to save his empire without asking for credit. His wife. The woman he'd been ignoring for 6 months. The complication he'd dismissed as temporary. She'd just become his only lifeline, and she hadn't said a word. Kyungsu spent 3 days reviewing the security footage, tracking the digital fingerprints, following the trail of corrections that had saved his empire from collapse. Every single one led back to the West Wing. To her. He pulled up 6 months of shipping records, and there it was, a pattern of subtle fixes, efficiency improvements, course corrections that had kept his organization running smoother than it had in years. While he'd been ignoring her, dismissing her as a complication, she'd been holding his empire together with invisible hands. The realization tasted like ashes. He remembered Lagos differently now. 5 years ago, running from a deal gone wrong, bleeding from a knife wound that should have killed him. Emmanuel Akojua had found him in a shipping container, feverish and close to death. The man had every reason to let a Korean crime lord die on his dock. Instead, he'd saved him, hidden him, called in doctors who didn't ask questions. Why? Kyungsu had asked when he could finally speak. Emmanuel had smiled. Because power without honor is just violence. And I believe in debts repaid. Kyungsu had sworn a blood debt that day. When Emmanuel called it in years later, requesting protection for his daughter through marriage, Kyungsu had agreed. But he'd never asked what kind of woman Zola was. He'd never bothered to look beyond the transaction. Now, staring at the evidence of her brilliance, he understood what a catastrophic mistake that had been. The confrontation happened in his office on Thursday morning. Zola walked in without knocking, her laptop under one arm, wearing a simple black blazer that somehow made her look like she owned the building. "We need to talk about operational transparency," she said. No preamble, no emotion. Pure business. Kyungsu leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You've been restructuring my shipping routes. Your shipping routes have been compromised for 18 months. I fixed them." Her tone suggested she was discussing the weather. "Now I need full access to the logistics database. The partial access your people gave me isn't sufficient. That's classified information." Then enjoy losing another 3,000,001 per quarter to the leaks I haven't been able to identify yet. She set her laptop on his desk, pulled up a spreadsheet. You have corruption in your Singapore operation, possible sabotage in Rotterdam, and someone in your inner circle is selling port schedules to the Beck syndicate. His blood went cold. The Becks. Yes, and I can't confirm who without full access to personnel files and communication logs. Kyung-soo stared at the data she'd compiled. It was meticulous, damning, undeniable. Why help me? The question came out rougher than he intended. Zola's eyes finally met his, and there was something sharp in them, something that might have been contempt. Because my father's reputation is tied to this alliance. Because I don't do anything halfway. And because watching your empire collapse from preventable stupidity would be embarrassing for everyone involved. Not because I care about you. Not because we're married. Because it was embarrassing. The words shouldn't have stung. They did. Limited access, he said finally. Logistics and shipping only. Nothing operational. That's insufficient. That's the offer. Zola accepted with a curt nod and walked out. Within 2 weeks, she'd identified 3 more leaks, restructured the entire West African network, and quietly exposed a senior manager who'd been embezzling for years. Kyung-soo watched it happen through reports that crossed his desk. Watched his associates, men twice her age with decades in the organization, defer to her assessments. Watched her command meeting rooms through video calls, her voice never rising above conversational level, her arguments so airtight that grown men nodded and took notes. She didn't need to shout. She simply knew more than everyone else in the room. And she knew that they knew it. Ji-hun approached him after one particularly brutal meeting where Zola had dismantled a logistics proposal in under 5 minutes. She's impressive, sir. Kyung-soo said nothing, but his jaw tightened as he watched the screen where Zola was already pulling up the next analysis. Her face composed, professional, utterly untouchable. His wife, the woman he'd dismissed, the complication that was rapidly becoming the most valuable asset in his organization. And he had no idea how to talk to her like a human being anymore. The message came Friday evening.
Urgent.
From the Port Authority in Busan. Mandatory inspection scheduled. All senior leadership required. Tuesday, 8 a.m. Kyung-soo stared at the notification, his instincts screaming warning. Mandatory inspections weren't routine. They were raids with paperwork. He needed someone who understood logistics, regulations, international shipping law. He needed someone who could find whatever trap was waiting for them. His fingers hovered over his phone, pride warring with necessity. Finally, he typed, Busan inspection Tuesday. I need you there. The response came 2 minutes later. Send me everything. All files. No restrictions. His turn to make a choice. Trust her completely, or walk into Busan blind. Busan's Port Authority building gleamed under fluorescent lights, sterile and efficient. Zola had reviewed every document 3 times, cross-referenced every shipment, memorized every regulation that could possibly apply. It's clean, she told Kyung-soo quietly as they walked through the inspection checkpoint. Almost too clean. He glanced at her, the first time he'd really looked at her in days. Meaning someone made sure we'd pass. Which means the inspection isn't the point. Before he could respond, the Port Authority director greeted them with excessive warmth, guiding them toward the secure docks where the Kim family's containers waited in neat rows. Armed guards flanked every entrance. Security cameras tracked every movement. Everything seemed perfect. Zola's instincts screamed otherwise. The first explosion tore through Container Bay 7 at exactly 8:47 a.m. The shockwave shattered windows, sent personnel diving for cover, triggered every alarm in the facility simultaneously. Kyung-soo's security team moved instantly, surrounding him in a protective formation, weapons drawn. The second explosion followed 3 seconds later. Then a third. Systematic, strategic, designed to create chaos, not maximum damage. Designed to separate people. Gunfire erupted from the southern perimeter. Not random spray, controlled bursts, professional execution. Kyung-soo's men returned fire, but the attackers had positioned themselves perfectly, using the container maze as cover. "Get him out!" Ji-hun screamed, physically dragging Kyung-soo toward the reinforced security room. That's when Kyung-soo realized Zola wasn't beside him anymore. She'd been pulled away in the initial chaos, separated by the security team's protective formation. He could see her 50 meters away, pressed against a container wall, her laptop bag still clutched to her chest, her eyes scanning for exits with the same analytical precision she brought to spreadsheets. She wasn't panicking. She was calculating. "Zola!" His voice tore from his throat, raw with something he didn't recognize. She turned, met his eyes across the smoke and confusion, and then they came for her. For men in tactical gear, moving with military precision, ignoring everyone else. Ignoring Kyung-soo's team. Ignoring the guards. They wanted her. Zola ran. Not toward Kyung-soo. She'd never make it through the crossfire. Toward the maintenance corridor, the route she'd memorized from the facility blueprints because she memorized everything. Smart. Logical. Exactly what he'd expect from her. But they'd expected it too. Kyung-soo watched it happen in slow motion. Watched Zola reach the corridor entrance. Watched 2 more men emerge from inside, cutting off her escape. Watched her make a split-second decision to fight. Her laptop bag swung like a weapon, connecting with one attacker's face. Then a hand clamped over her mouth. An arm locked around her waist. She kicked, twisted, every self-defense move she'd probably learned in some corporate safety seminar, useless against professionals. Zola! He was moving before conscious thought, shoving past Ji-hun, past his own security team. Too far. Too slow. They dragged her into a black van. The door slammed. Tires screamed against pavement. She was gone. The fear hit him like a physical force. Not anger, he understood anger. Not rage. Rage was familiar, useful, something he could weaponize. This was terror. Pure. Shocking. Absolute. Because Zola wasn't screaming. She wasn't begging. She was thinking, analyzing, trying to solve this like every other problem she'd encountered. And these men would break her to get what they wanted. Ji-hun grabbed his arm. "Sir, we need to." That wasn't random. Kyung-soo's voice came out cold. Dead. They positioned the explosions to separate us. Timed the attack to the inspection. Knew exactly where she'd be. The Becks, one of his lieutenants confirmed, pointing to tactical gear left behind. Their signature equipment. But Kyung-soo was already seeing it clearly. Too clearly. They hadn't targeted him. Every explosion, every tactical position, every move, designed not to kill the head of the Kim family, but to take something from him. Someone. "They don't want ransom," Zola had told him once, discussing theoretical security scenarios. Smart enemies don't take hostages for money. They take them for information, leverage, or strategic advantage. She'd been preparing for this, probably since the day she'd discovered the Beck syndicate's involvement in his networks. And he'd given her limited access, kept her at arm's length, treated her like a complication instead of the most valuable strategic mind in his organization. The second lieutenant's phone buzzed. Security footage. The van's route, tracked through traffic cameras until it disappeared into the warehouse district. Specifically into an abandoned shipping warehouse registered to a shell company. A shell company Zola had flagged in her reports 3 weeks ago as suspicious. She'd known. She'd known something was coming. And he'd been too proud, too stubborn, too afraid of needing her to listen. Kyung-soo's hand closed around his phone so tightly the screen cracked. "Mobilize everyone," he said quietly. Now. Because his wife, the woman he'd screamed at, ignored, dismissed as unwanted, was somewhere in that warehouse. And for the first time in years, Kyung-soo understood what it meant to be truly afraid. The warehouse smelled of rust and salt water. Zola's wrists burned where the zip ties cut into her skin, but she kept her breathing steady, her mind sharper than the fear trying to claw its way up her throat. 3 men. 2 exits she'd counted before they'd blindfolded her. Industrial district, based on the sound of container cranes in the distance. Approximately 20 minutes from the port. She was already mapping escape routes she couldn't use yet. You're calmer than I expected, said a voice in accented Korean. Older, authoritative, not the men who'd grabbed her. Zola lifted her chin toward the voice, her blindfold still in place. Panicking won't change my situation, so let's skip to the part where you tell me what you want. A pause, then laughter, surprised, almost respectful. Remove it, the voice commanded. The blindfold came off. Zola blinked against harsh fluorescent lights, focusing on the man before her. 50s, expensive suit inappropriate for a warehouse, calculating eyes that reminded her of every corporate negotiator she'd ever faced down. Baek Min-suk, head of the Baek Syndicate. She recognized him from intelligence reports she'd compiled. You know who I am, he observed. I know you've been bleeding Kyungsu's routes for 8 months.
Singapore, Rotterdam, Lagos.
Very efficient, almost elegant. She kept her voice conversational, like they were discussing quarterly reports. I also know you're overextended. You're taking too much territory too fast. His eyebrow raised. The files said you were brilliant. They didn't mention you were suicidal.
I'm practical.
You didn't kidnap me for ransom. Kyungsu would burn Seoul to the ground before paying you. You didn't take me to kill me. I'd already be dead. So you want something only I can provide. She paused. Access. Min-suk smiled slowly. The codes, the routes, the entire Kim logistics network. You rebuilt it. You understand it better than anyone, including your husband. And you think I'll just hand it over? I think you're a pragmatist who understands survival. He pulled out a tablet, pulled up files, surveillance photos. Her father in Lagos. Her sister finishing her degree in London. Her assistant who'd sent that encrypted warning. I think you understand what happens to brilliant women who refuse to cooperate. Zola's jaw tightened, but her mind was already racing. They wanted her expertise, which meant they needed her willing or at least compliant. Torture would compromise her accuracy, make her useless. She had leverage. Not much, but enough. The system is segmented, she said carefully. Even I don't have complete access. Kyungsu restricted me to logistics only. Truth, useful truth. But you could reconstruct it, given the right data. Maybe, she met his eyes. Or maybe I feed you false routes that collapse your entire operation within a week. How would you know the difference? The slap came fast, snapping her head to the side. Pain exploded across her cheek, but she'd been expecting it. She turned back slowly, deliberately, letting him see that she wasn't broken. Defiance is expensive, Min-suk said softly. So is desperation, Zola countered. You're here because you need me. That means I have value. That means we negotiate. Before he could respond, the warehouse's southern wall exploded inward. Gunfire erupted instantly. Zola threw herself sideways, chair and all, hitting the concrete hard as bullets tore through the space where she'd been sitting. Her ears rang. Smoke filled the air. Chaos, beautiful, violent chaos. Through the haze, she saw him, Kyung-soo, moving through the warehouse like death incarnate, his weapon raised, his face a mask of cold fury she'd never seen before. His team flanked him, efficient and brutal, taking down Beck's men with precision that spoke of pure rage channeled into violence. He reached her in seconds, dropping to his knees, his hands surprisingly gentle as they cut through her restraints. Are you hurt? His voice was hoarse, his eyes scanning her face, pausing on the mark where Min-suk had struck her. I'm fine. But Kyung-soo. Later. He pulled her to her feet, shielding her body with his as they moved toward the exit. By the time they reached the safe house, Zola's hands had stopped shaking, but her mind hadn't stopped working. She'd replayed the conversation with Min-suk 17 times, analyzed every question he'd asked, every file he'd shown her, and she'd seen something that made her blood run cold. Kyung-soo stood across the room, disheveled, still carrying the violence in his shoulders. His team had secured the perimeter. They were safe, but they weren't. Zola. He turned to her, and for the first time since their wedding, she saw something raw in his face. I need you to. The empire is bleeding, she interrupted, her voice flat with certainty. Min-suk showed me files I've never seen. Routes I didn't know existed. Access points I never touched. She met his eyes. He didn't want me to give him your network. He wanted to show me he already has it. Silence. The kidnapping was theater. A distraction. Her voice didn't shake. It should have. While you were rescuing me, while your entire security team was at that warehouse, someone else was executing the real operation. Kyung-soo's face went white. The main servers are compromised. Yes. Zola pulled out her phone. They'd never searched her. Another calculated message, and pulled up the emergency alerts. You have maybe 6 hours before every rival family in Seoul realizes your entire operation is exposed. How do we? I don't know yet, she said quietly. But we're about to find out if you actually trust me. The safe-house bathroom light was too bright, clinical. Zola stood at the sink, washing dried blood from a cut on her temple she hadn't noticed until now. Her reflection looked back at her, bruised cheek already darkening, eyes exhausted but alert, the same analytical expression she wore reviewing spreadsheets. She heard him before she saw him. Kyung-soo's reflection appeared in the mirror, hovering in the doorway like he wasn't sure he had permission to enter. Let me. His voice came out rough, unfamiliar. Zola turned, watching him approach with a first aid kit. His hands not quite steady. He'd shed his jacket, his white shirt stained with smoke and someone else's blood, his usually immaculate appearance shattered. He looked human, breakable. He reached for her face, fingers hovering near the bruise Min-suk had left. He hit you. Standard intimidation tactic. I've had worse in Lagos boardrooms. She tried to step back, but he caught her wrist. Not restraining, just holding. Zola. Her name came out like a confession. We don't have time for guilt. She pulled free gently, professionally. Sit. I need you to focus. He sat. She remained standing, pulling out her phone, projecting data onto the bathroom mirror using a portable device she'd carried in her bag. Even kidnapped, she'd been prepared. The numbers painted a catastrophic picture. Red indicators marked compromised routes across 3 continents. Security breaches flagged in systems she'd spent months securing. Access points she'd never even known existed. Shadow networks Kyung-soo had kept hidden even from her. Your Singapore operation will collapse by dawn, she said, her tone clinical. Rotterdam will follow within 12 hours. Lagos, my father's routes, are exposed but not yet exploited. They're saving those for maximum damage. Kyung-soo stared at the data. His jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. How did they? Inside access. Someone in your inner circle has been feeding them information for months. Maybe longer. She swiped to another screen. The kidnapping wasn't about taking me. It was about pulling every single one of your resources to Busan while they executed the real breach in Seoul. Who? I don't know yet, but I will. She paused, meeting his eyes in the reflection. If you give me what I asked for 3 months ago, complete access, no restrictions, no prive, no fear. Silence stretched between them, heavy with 6 months of resentment and unspoken truths. I was wrong. The words came out quiet, barely audible. About you. Zola turned to face him directly. I know. I thought. He stopped, started again. I thought if I kept distance, if I treated this like every other business arrangement, I could control it. Control everything. Control isn't the same as power, she said. And power without trust is just fear in expensive clothes. He looked up at her, and she saw something she'd never seen before. Genuine fear. Not for his empire. For her. They would have broken you, he said hoarsely, to get what they wanted. They would have. They would have failed. Her voice carried absolute certainty. I've survived worse than Baek Min-suk. I survived you. The words landed like a physical blow. Kyung-soo flinched, but didn't look away. When you said you never wanted me, she continued, her voice steady but sharp, you made me invisible in my own marriage. You took away the one thing I've never allowed anyone to take. My voice. My value. My presence. I know. Do you? She stepped closer. Because right now, you're about to lose everything you've built. Every route, every contact, every carefully constructed alliance. Your empire is bleeding out in real time. And you're sitting in a bathroom, looking at me like I'm supposed to save you. You are, he said simply. You're my only solution. The admission hung between them, raw, honest, terrifying in its vulnerability. I can't fix this with violence, he continued. I can't intimidate or threaten my way out. I can't command this problem away. Everything I know how to do is useless right now. He stood slowly, maintaining distance, respecting the space she'd built between them. But you, he said quietly, you see patterns I miss. You understand systems I barely comprehend. You've been holding my empire together for months while I was too proud to admit I needed you. And now I'm asking. The words seemed to cost him everything. Not as your husband, not as a crime lord who expects obedience. As someone who's watching everything collapse and knows he has no right to your help after how he's treated you. Zola studied him, really studied him, looking for manipulation, for strategy, for the calculation she'd expect. She found only exhaustion and truth. 6 hours, she said finally. In 6 hours, the Becks will move. Every rival family in Seoul will sense weakness. Your allies will reconsider their loyalty. The empire your family built over decades will start crumbling. I know. Can you follow orders? She asked. Can you let me lead? Can you trust me completely? Even when you don't understand what I'm doing? Kyung-soo met her eyes. Yes. Then we save your empire, Sola said, pulling out her laptop. My way. They worked in silence for the first hour. Zola's fingers flew across her keyboard, building layers of false data, creating ghost routes, setting digital traps that would take weeks for the Becks to untangle. Kyung-soo sat across from her, making calls, mobilizing resources, following her instructions without question. It should have felt like victory, felt like walking on broken glass. Stop, she said suddenly, looking up from her screen. He paused mid-dial. What's wrong? This. She gestured between them. We can't work like this. With everything unsaid hanging in the air like smoke. Kyung-soo set down his phone carefully. We have 5 hours. Then we make time. Her voice was steel. Because I won't save your empire while pretending we're strangers. Not anymore. He stood, paced to the window, his back to her. The Seoul skyline glittered in the distance. His kingdom, burning from the inside while he stood helpless. I didn't hate you, he said finally, his voice low. That night, the wedding, when I said those things. I know. I heard the full conversation. Remember? Zola's tone was clinical. You said I wasn't what you wanted. That I didn't understand your world. That I was... What was it? A complication. He flinched. I was lying. To your inner circle? Or to yourself? Kyung-soo turned, and his face was raw with something she'd never seen before. Not the controlled crime lord. Not the strategic negotiator. Just a man who'd run out of armor. To myself, he admitted. Because wanting you terrified me. Zola's hands stilled on her keyboard. Explain. Everyone in my life wants something. Power, money, protection, status. His words came faster now, like a dam breaking. I understand that language. I know how to navigate it. But you... He stopped, struggling. You walked into my world and didn't ask for anything. You didn't need my money, you had your own career. You didn't need my protection, you were more than capable. You didn't even want to be here. He laughed bitterly. You were brilliant and angry and completely unimpressed by everything I'd built. And that terrified me. Why? Because you saw me. The confession came out broken. Not the reputation. Not the power. Not the careful image I've spent 15 years constructing. You looked at me like I was just a man. A flawed, desperate man who needed you and hated himself for it. Zola stood slowly. So you made me invisible instead. Yes.
No excuses. No deflección.
You screamed that you never wanted me in front of your entire inner circle. Let them treat me like furniture. Kept me at arm's length for 6 months while I saved your empire in silence. Her voice was controlled fury. All because I made you feel exposed? I know what I did. Kyung-soo's hands clenched at his sides. I know there's no apology that covers it. No excuse that makes it acceptable. Then why tell me now? She demanded. Why this confession in the middle of a crisis? Is this strategy? Manipulation? A calculated move to secure my cooperation?
No.
He stepped closer, then stopped himself, respecting the distance between them. It's just the truth. The truth I should have told you 6 months ago. The truth I was too much of a coward to face. Zola studied him, her analytical mind cataloging every micro-expression, every tell, looking for the lie, the angle, the hidden agenda. She found only exhaustion and honesty. You don't get absolution because you're honest now, she said finally. I know. You don't get to unload your guilt and expect me to carry it for you. I know. And you definitely don't get to pretend this confession makes us partners. Equal. United. Her voice was ice. You spent 6 months treating me like a complication. One emotional breakthrough doesn't erase that. Kyung-soo nodded, his jaw tight. What do you want from me? Nothing. The word landed like a blade. I don't want your guilt. I don't want your fear explained and packaged as vulnerability. I don't want emotional shortcuts to intimacy we haven't earned. Then what? Zola moved to stand directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the bruise on her face, the exhaustion in her eyes, the steel in her spine. I want respect, she said quietly. Not because I saved your empire, not because you're afraid of losing me, but because I'm brilliant, capable, and I've earned it. I want my voice heard in every decision. I want access to everything. No secrets, no restrictions, no protecting me from your world. She paused, making sure he understood every word. I want to be your equal, not your asset, not your complication, not your wife in name only. Her eyes burned into his. Your actual equal, or I walk away and let your empire burn. Silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of 6 months and one catastrophic night. And if I agree? Kyung-soo asked quietly. Then we save your empire, Zola said, turning back to her laptop. My way, with my strategies, my decisions, my authority. You follow my lead without question. You trust me completely. You let me command rooms full of men who've spent months dismissing me. She looked back at him over her shoulder. Can you do that? Can you surrender control to the woman you never wanted? Kyung-soo met her eyes.
No hesitaste. No calculaste.
Yes. Then sit down, Zola commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who just claimed her power. And let me show you how to win a war without firing a single shot. Zola worked like a surgeon performing open-heart surgery. Precise, unflinching, utterly focused. Her laptop became command central, 3 monitors displaying simultaneous operations across continents. Call Rotterdam, she instructed without looking up. Tell them to reroute the Friday shipment through Hamburg instead. Use the secondary codes I'm sending now. Kyung-soo made the call. No questions.
No hesitaste.
Singapore. I need you to access the Beck's intercepted communications from last month. They mentioned a contact named Prometheus. Find him. Ji-hun, listening on speaker, paused. Ma'am, that intel is classified. I know. Access it anyway. Her tone left no room for debate. Kyung-soo nodded to his lieutenant. Do it. The first domino fell at 2 a.m. Zola had created a ghost port in Manila, completely fabricated, backed by months of false documentation, shipping manifests for cargo that didn't exist. She'd leaked the information through channels the Becks had compromised, making it look like an accidental exposure. They took the bait. They're redirecting resources, Ji-hun reported, watching real-time intelligence. Moving men and capital to intercept the Manila shipment. Good. Zola pulled up another screen. Now we collapse their Singapore operation while they're distracted. She'd identified the Beck's primary partner, a shipping magnate who'd been playing both sides. With surgical precision, she fed him information suggesting the Becks were planning to eliminate him after the Kim empire fell. The partnership dissolved within hours. By 4 a.m., the whispers had started. Crime families across Seoul were receiving reports. The Kim organization wasn't collapsing. It was adapting. Shipments were moving through routes no one knew existed. Intelligence was suddenly worthless. The carefully orchestrated attack had somehow failed, and someone new was commanding the response. Who is she? The question rippled through encrypted channels, dark web forums, carefully coded phone calls. The wife, Zola Akojua. The logistics analyst? Not anymore. Kyung-soo watched it happen with something between awe and respect. Zola commanded his organization like she'd been born to it, but differently than he ever had. She didn't rely on fear or violence. She understood that information was more valuable than bullets, that precision was more powerful than rage. She dismantled the Beck syndicate's entire operation without a single shot fired. At 5 a.m., she finally leaned back, her eyes red from screen glare, her coffee cold beside her. "It's done," she announced. "The Becks?" Kyung-soo asked. "Compromised. Their alliances are fractured. Their routes are exposed. Their partners think they're liabilities." She pulled up a final screen: bank transfers, communications, evidence of corruption. "And I've documented everything. You can destroy them completely, or you can leverage this for negotiations. Your choice. What would you do?" She looked at him, surprised he'd asked. "Negotiate. Destroyed enemies become martyrs. Defeated enemies become cautionary tales. Make them bend the knee publicly. Let the underworld see that attacking the Kim family has consequences worse than death." Kyung-soo stood, moved to where his senior lieutenants had gathered in the safehouse living room. Men who'd served his family for decades, who'd watched him grow from ambitious teenager to feared crime lord. "This is Zola Akojua Kim," he said quietly. "From this moment forward, she has full authority over all logistics, intelligence, and strategic operations. Her word carries the same weight as mine. Anyone who disrespects her, dismisses her, or undermines her answers to me personally." Silence. "Is that understood?" "Yes, sir." They responded in unison, but their eyes were on Zola, reassessing, recalculating, finally seeing her. She stood, closing her laptop with deliberate calm. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who just saved their organization. "I look forward to working with you, properly this time." By dawn, the immediate crisis had passed. The empire stood. The Becks were crippled. Seoul's underworld was recalibrating their understanding of the Kim family's power structure. Kyung-soo found Zola on the safehouse balcony, watching the sun rise over a city that would wake to find the balance of power had shifted overnight. "You saved everything," he said quietly, standing beside her but not touching. "I saved your empire," she corrected. "The marriage is still broken." He nodded, expecting this. "What do you want?" "I told you. Equality. Real equality." She turned to face him. "I want my name on documents. I want a voice in decisions that affect me. I want respect in rooms where I'm the only woman. I want you to see me as a partner, not an asset to protect or a problem to manage." "Done." "I'm not finished." Her voice was steel. "I want you to understand that love, if it ever happens between us, will be built on respect, not fear. On choice, not obligation. On partnership, not possession." Kyung-soo met her eyes. "And if I want that too?" "Then you prove it," Zola said. "Every day. With every decision. With every moment you choose to see me as your equal instead of your complication." She moved toward the door, then paused. "The empire survived, Kyung-soo, but we don't get to pretend one night of honesty erases 6 months of dismissal. You want my partnership, my respect, my eventual trust." She looked back at him. "You earn it." And then she walked inside, leaving him alone with the sunrise and the understanding that he'd just witnessed the birth of something unprecedented in Seoul's underworld. Not a crime lord's wife, a queen without a crown, who'd just proven she didn't need one. 3 months later, the Kim estate felt different. Not warmer, warmth was still a distant concept, but inhabited. The artificial separation between wings had dissolved into something more organic. Shared morning coffee in the kitchen, strategy sessions that ran past midnight, comfortable silences that didn't feel like punishment. They didn't fall into love overnight. They built it brick by brick, decision by decision, out of respect that had been earned in blood and crisis. Zola stood in the main conference room, facing 15 senior members of the Kim organization. Men who'd dismissed her 6 months ago now took notes when she spoke. The European expansion, she said, pulling up projections, requires partnerships we don't currently have. I've identified 3 potential allies, but the Moretti family in Rome offers the best strategic advantage. The Morettis are notoriously difficult to negotiate with. One lieutenant argued carefully. Not dismissive, respectful disagreement. Which is why I've already opened communications. She pulled up email exchanges. Their daughter studied logistics at Oxford. We have common ground. Kyung-soo watched from the head of the table, and something in his chest tightened. Not possessiveness, but recognition. This was who she'd always been. He'd just been too afraid to see it. Questions? Zola asked. Silence. Then nods of approval. Good. Meeting adjourned. They walked back to the estate together, a routine that had developed naturally over weeks. Not holding hands, not touching, just together. You were impressive in there, Kyung-soo said. I'm always impressive. But there was humor in her voice now, not bitterness. Yes, he agreed simply. You are. They reached the main foyer, the same marble corridors where she'd overheard his rejection 9 months ago. The symmetry wasn't lost on either of them. Zola. He stopped, and something in his tone made her turn. I need to tell you something. She waited, guarded but present. I want you, he said quietly. Not as an asset. Not as a solution to my problems. Not because you saved my empire or because you're strategically valuable. He stepped closer, giving her space to retreat if she chose. I want you because you challenge me, because you see through every defense I've built, because you're brilliant and terrifying, and you've never once let me diminish you. Zola studied his face, searching for calculation, for strategy, for the angle she'd learned to expect from men in their world. She found only honesty, and something more fragile, hope. Words are easy, she said finally. I know. He didn't look away. Which is why I've spent 3 months proving it. Following your lead, amplifying your voice, making space for you in every room I enter, respecting your decisions even when they contradicted mine. You have, she acknowledged. I know it's not enough. I know I destroyed something between us that night, trust that should have been foundation. His voice roughened. But if you're willing, I want to build something new, something real, not a power marriage. Not a contract, partnership, equals in every sense. Zola let the moment breathe, feeling the weight of his words against the reality of his actions. 3 months of consistency, of respect demonstrated, not just promised, of power shared, not hoarded. I'm not easy to love, she warned. I don't want easy. I want you. I'll challenge every decision, question every strategy. Refuse to be sidelined or protected or treated like anything less than your equal. I know. A slight smile touched his lips. It's one of the things I love about you. The word hung between them, love, still new, still fragile, but no longer impossible. Then we continue, Zola said, stepping closer, closing the distance she'd maintained for months. Building this, together, as equals. As equals, he agreed. She kissed him then, not passionately, not desperately, but deliberately. A choice, a beginning. 2 weeks later, the Seoul underworld gathered for a summit. Rival families, uneasy allies, power brokers who'd spent decades navigating the criminal landscape. Kyung-soo entered the main hall with Zola beside him. Not behind him, not introduced as an accessory. Beside him, the Kim family, the moderator announced, represented by Kyung-soo Kim and Zola Akojua Kim, co-directors of operations. The room went silent. Then slowly they stood. Acknowledgement, respect, not for Kyung-soo's violence or his family legacy. For her, for what she'd proven. For the queen without a crown who'd rewritten the rules. That night, in their shared bedroom, no longer separated by wings and pride, Kyung-soo found Zola reviewing contracts, her laptop balanced on her knees. "Still working?" he asked. "Always." But she set it aside when he sat beside her. "The Moretti deal is almost finalized. Because you're brilliant. Because I'm thorough." She leaned against his shoulder, a gesture that 3 months ago would have been impossible. "We make a good team." "We do." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Though I think team is an understatement. What you did, what you are, changed everything."
No.
Zola looked up at him, her eyes soft but certain. "What I am is what I always was. You just finally had the courage to see it." And in that moment, Kyung-soo understood the profound truth she'd been teaching him for 9 months. Power wasn't about control. It was about trust. Love wasn't about possession. It was about choice. And the strongest partnerships were built not on dominance, but on two people standing side by side, equals in every battle. The underworld whispered her name now, not as Kyung-soo's wife, but as a force in her own right. The woman who'd been dismissed, underestimated, married like a contract acquisition. The woman who'd saved an empire and claimed her crown in the process. They had tried to break him by taking his wife. Instead, they crowned her. And the underworld would never be the same again. If you enjoyed the story this far, don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next chapter and enjoy more story from us. And if this story gave you chills, drop a like and share it with someone who loves powerful romance with a dangerous edge. Your support keeps these stories coming. Thank you.